My name is David Wagner. I live in Scotland, Connecticut. I am 72 years old, recently turned that old, and when I was younger, in my very young days, just out of the service, I became involved in the anti-fluoridation program in Connecticut and delivered a petition of 30,000 signatures to the Attorney General of the United States several months later. Yes, I became interested in fluoridation of water one day when I had got on the service fairly recently. I was reading a newspaper article about fluoridation of the water in Jewett City. That's the town that I lived in at the time. And I became really quite curious about it and decided, well, I would research as much as I could and find out what I could about fluoridation itself. So I started writing different places for information. The best piece of information I ever got came out of the University of Wisconsin. It was a booklet on experimentation with pigs and fluoridation. And it was an eye-opener because I didn't know anything about it at all, aside that they were putting this in the water and it's supposed to be good for your teeth. Or so they said anyway. And as I got into it more and began reading the articles and information that I had, I was running down most of the leagues. I developed a pretty good idea of where it was going and what they wanted to do. The idea of putting medication of any kind in the water supply is just mass medication without history and a precedent of medicine. That's the thing. This was the first time it was being done in that instance. It wasn't like chlorination, which they used to like to confuse people. Chlorination is for the purification of water, and fluoridation is for the treatment of water, so that it will appear in the water supply itself. Two types of fluoridation I also learned was the sodium fluoride, which is a synthetic type that they buy, which is potentially more powerful and more, I don't like to use the word poisonous, but it is. And the other one is the natural calcium fluoride, which occurs out west all over the place in fairly great abundance in the water supply. It creates mottling of the teeth, if you know what that is. It makes little spots here and there. But that only happens to young people. There's an interesting aspect of that because that protects you against the poisonous nature of the substance going into that. The body defends itself two ways. One is to absorb into the bones of the tissue poisons of any kind that don't normally belong there. And the other one is you reject it, quickly through the kidneys, but a lot of it always lingers on. And the thing was that from the information that I was gathering and learning more and more about, because I don't want to sound like a physician, as I'm definitely not, and I didn't want to get into that scope because I found out that the opposition, people who were for it, loved to kind of nail you as a kind of a doctor of some sort when you were not. So I kind of steered away from that and kept to the facts that I could get to them. So anyway, I began really researching it quite thoroughly and found out that the body protects itself in children more than adults because their bones are still in forming years. And the fluoride naturally goes to that source for protection, and it'll embed itself in the bone or the teeth and won't hurt anybody until a point is reached where the soft tissues of the body are no longer able to absorb the fluoride. Then it's free to exert general toxic effects on the rest of the tissues of the body. And it manifests itself in any number of diseases or sicknesses or whatever the case may be. From you name it, they say it could have a bearing upon how it got there in the beginning, So I said that was really interesting. So it brought on once the body expended its natural devices for preventing it from being toxic, that after a while it would become toxic if it exceeded a certain amount, Because at the time I think they were talking, and you may help me on this one, about 1 part per million. That's so infinitesimally small, it doesn't amount to anything. That would be true if the fluoride would be exhausted from the body all at once or over a period of several weeks, or it didn't absorb into the tissue of the bones of the body or the teeth. But it did. And the thing is that what it said is it continued to absorb as best it could the general toxic effects on the body. And the University of Wisconsin used a number of pigs to experiments, and they overdosed them huge amounts of fluoride. They were using synthetic sodium fluoride that they put in the water supply, which is more dangerous than the regular calcium fluoride. And what happened was that the pigs, which would normally withstand toxic effects, got to a point where very quickly it couldn't. And it was also killing off the pigs, too. That's how bad it was. So it didn't take very long for the adult pigs, at least, to absorb into the soft tissues and create thrombosis or whatever. You could have different things in the pig itself and eventually kill it within a very short period of time. But no one, in all the information that I was getting from the people who promoted the idea, No one mentioned that bulletin. So I got quite a few of them. I wish I still had some. I don't have them. It's been a long time. I think you might be able to get a reprint, though, if you're at the University of Wisconsin. About 1953, I think it was a bulletin. So, but it explained it clearly, and what it explained doesn't change in time. It's the factors, the physiological factors against the body still remain the same. So, anyway, not to be a smart guy, a wise guy, I just said, geez, you know, the question about medicine and all is a good one, but we can't talk so much about that. I'm more entitled to my rights. I don't want somebody fluoridating the water that I drink. If they do, I want to have a choice. I want to have either water that isn't or water that is. That's the normal way. That's the big question that comes into mind. It's a constitutional question. It's the right to say no, especially with your own body. We hear this thing about women and their own bodies. Well, what about our own bodies and fluoridation? Nobody seems to pay any attention to that. So that issue doesn't go away. It can't. It's out there. And it's out there for a reason. I think there's going to be a really big disaster, and they're going to find out that the effects of fluoridation for all these years have really taken a massive thing upon the population itself. Well, first off, I couldn't oppose except in town as best I could, but there was they don't have a referendum on it or anything like that. And I would, how could I oppose this? I thought to myself, the best thing to do is to circulate a petition. And if you're talking about constitutional rights, then somehow or another have a petition to bring it down to Washington, get as many people as you could to sign it, that they were against it as a matter of choice. Not against it because of his medical qualities or lack of them, but you had a choice either to choose or not to choose. So I went around and for a period of probably about 6 months circulated a petition and collected about 30,000 signatures, if I recall. Everybody that I met was aware of it. There's a lot of emotionality going on with the issue in the towns, especially in Plainfield, in Jewett City and other towns. So people were aware and involved of what was going on, and they didn't like the idea either. They just didn't like the idea that they had no choice except to accept it, and they piped it right into their house, so you didn't have a choice to turn it off or separate it out. So that really seemed to be the underlying aspect of it all, is that people didn't have the right to say no. And in this country, you got to have the right to say no. I had just got out of the service, and I had enlisted during the Vietnam War. Fortunately, I didn't go there, but I saw enough bodies come out of there. Said, you know, we were fighting for the right to say no, and that was really my motivation. Was that I think it was about time to do something. So I got in my little Volkswagen and went all around, stopped at different places, got a lot of people to sign it. Then I made arrangements to meet with Attorney General. Was it Clark? Wasn't that his name? Mm-hmm. Yeah, what was his first name?
I can't recall.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure.
So I called the office, and they said, okay, I could come down. I actually made an appointment to see him, so I went down to Washington and appeared in the Justice Department office. Big plush office with carpets about 2 foot thick with kind of nice pilings on it and all. So I never did see him, but I saw the secretary, and she took the petition that I had presented. It was all rolled up in a nice old kind of yellowish paper. It looked like a very old legal document. It said, we the people, that's how it started off with, have a right to say no in regards to mass medication. So I didn't know how it was taken on this end, but I heard all the newspapers picked it up on this end when I went down there. I couldn't, at the time it was done, I didn't realize that. That was my first trip to Washington. And everybody treated me nicely, but not for very long. They very quickly ushered me out, and I was on my way, you know. So I delivered that and hoped that something would come of it, but I can't remember what the Attorney General said. Did you read any articles and stuff?
No, I'm not sure. No.
I think he just put it in the closet somewhere and forgot about it. That's what I think happened. But it was a lesson in itself, is that if you're going to do this, you make sure it's the right way of doing it. And it says, and I use the general term that people have a right to petition their government for grievances. Okay, and that was a way to do it. I thought for sure, and all the 30,000 people that were with me thought the same thing too. So time went on, and I guess they eventually got fluoridation. There's a weakness in that whole thing, is that for the general welfare, it also states that in the Constitution, an awful lot of crimes can be committed, and this could be one of the biggest going, you know. But I never pursued it that way. So actually, I got a lot of people, we formed different organizations, I think, that we had, local groups, and we would go to different towns that were getting fluoridation when they tried to put up a referendum. And most of the referendums were defeated. The only ones that got in were the ones that didn't have referendums. So it says a lot about it, you know. And so, anyway, it kind of died off after that, and I would hear from different people who had been on different groups over the years and that asked for information that I had or any stuff that might be useful to them, but we used to give it to them. But then it kind of just died off, and I went and do my own thing, and everybody, so it never came up after that. It can be somehow resurrected. I think there'd be a whole different aspect to it because we were getting very conscious health-wise about a lot of things, green stuff and stuff that's natural, and that sort of that's not natural. Although the first thing they'll say that sodium fluoride is natural as calcium fluoride. Sodium fluoride is totally a synthetic chemical made by chemical companies. It works the same in water for the way it dissolves, but it's I guess I don't know how many times more potent than the natural calcium fluoride, which started the whole business in the beginning. If you get natural calcium, it doesn't affect you toxically like the sodium fluoride. But the bulletin of Wisconsin, the bulletin that came out in '52, I guess, where the swines were used for experimentation, really scared the devil out if you read it. Those questions that were raised by that study were never answered by anybody. And all the hogs that were used were died, in a short period of time. Again, they're extra resistant. The hogs are terribly resistant to any toxic thing, more so than humans are by an incredible amount of percentage, So if someone could raise it up again today, they'd have to do, I think that what was necessary and needed is quite a bit more education up in front before you do anything. Lay it down and lay it out, and also, talk about what they want to do medically and what you have a right to do constitutionally. It's really important. I think it's the only safeguard we had ultimately in the end is the Constitution. You can't do it. You can't do that to me. I don't want to allow it, and no one can force me to do that. Because I was just gotten out of the Vietnam War, and that period of time there, and boy, I was saying, I was ready to put my life on the line for those rights, and everybody should have those rights. So that was really kind of motivated me to get going then at the time, But as far as a new approach to it, I guess you could try it, but I don't know if it should be done at a state level or the local level. The local level is where it's applied, where the jurisdictional problem is, or lack of a problem, I think. That's probably where it would be, but it's a question that's promoted nationally all over the place. And when you take it, the American Dental Association has a chart which keeps track of all the towns in the country that have and the ones that haven't, And that's another thing they say, that there's been no great discoveries in dentistry like in medicine. That was one of the things that they were really using as the shining banner of something that we've been able to do, but too many risks involved in that, So, but it would be nice to see new groups forming, but I think the approach should be different and thought out. I really don't know exactly which would be the best way to do it, but actually, they show some of the pictures. I don't know if you've seen some of the pictures of the fluoridation. The guys with masks and everything could kill you, It's a rat poison, too. It's warfarin. That's what they use it for a blood thinner in the human body now for different things in very small amounts. But there is a danger. There always is. It does a good job on rats in an amount greater than 1 part per million, If you put it out, it'll kill them. And what it does is it drives them to drink water, and then it blows their intestines apart, and kills them. But that could also happen to humans. The Germans may have used that too in some of the concentration camps, just to find the best way to exterminate, So there's no good history with fluoridation at all, none. None that you can look over and say, I got a great set of teeth. I don't. I have a lousy set of teeth. I have a lot of false teeth too, but there isn't anything that can be done unless, and I don't know whether everybody fears that study that it was done. Just want to keep it quiet and don't even talk about it. I could talk in groups, and they would answer most questions. Even when they had a doctor or two, I just simply referred to the findings in the study, and they had no answer to that, But it's very dangerous. And of course, another precedent is that they can do it for one thing, for fluoride. They can do it for any number of things. That's the way it doesn't. It opens a door. In democracy, an exception to the rule becomes the rule. That's the danger. Because we're giving up our rights for somebody's idea of fluoridating us, medicating the water supply is the easiest way to get it to us. Well, how about any other things? Tranquilizers all keep us down, keep us mellowed out, and anything is possible if you can get for the purpose of health, the health of the population, health of the body. That's a big sell. Everybody, and you can't be against the health. You shouldn't be against health. But it's what they try to sneak in on the side to do that really should be looked at thoroughly. Wisconsin Bulletin covered every aspect of experimentation with swine. You know, they use heavier doses in some and less in others. And there was a severe mental handicap by doses that were extra larger and large amounts than they were using in control groups and versus non-control groups. That study really told a clear indication to anybody that wanted to read it that it was a very dangerous thing, and it could have had to be handled a little bit more carefully than the way it was being handled, you know. Because in reservoirs, they bring bags of fluoride up to and they have to use all kinds of special masks and everything else, and all that stuff gets out. Whether you could poison an entire population by dumping it in the water, I don't think that's possible. It would dilute it down too much. But it would have an effect otherwise, and that's the danger of it. Unless you can continually over-medicate, if I want to use that term, instead of 1 part per million, 10 to 12 or 15 or 20. After a while, it would definitely, the population would be becoming sick and everywhere. And there's been sicknesses that they haven't been able to point to as what was the cause of it in different cities. I saw occasionally, they check everything except fluoride. And in 1 or 2 studies I see, I don't know where it was, out in the Midwest somewhere, they said, someone brought up the question that it was, and then the thing was, no, it would never be fluoride. Just quickly, just shut it off. And that's wrong. You got to experiment. You got to find out why it is so, and eliminate that possibility. And when they start doing that, they're going to find out they should have never used it in the beginning. Anyway, ability to mask other physiological effects of different chemicals in the water, whether it's heavy metals or whatever the case, the fluoride dominates it all. It generally combines with it, and it changes the chemical molecule to like calcium fluoride or sodium fluoride. It does. They join together and they form it, but it forms either stronger. In most cases, when it does that, whether it's mercury or otherwise, forms greater toxic substances than they were separately before. They just kind of join together, and the ions, and if you understand the chemical breakdown of it, are 10 times more stronger or hazardous than what they would otherwise would be. But it hasn't, and most of the studies connected with it show that it hasn't affected the amount of dentistry not being done or being done within the community, and there's no doctors that are going out of business because of fluoridation. So anyway, that's a big factor. It doesn't do what it says it's supposed to do. The doctors who knew about it were the ones that were concerned with promoting it. They worked for the state or being funded by the state. They had salaries. That was their job, to go out and do that. They knew about it, or they promoted it. They didn't look at the bad aspects of it, just the good aspects, if there are any anyway to begin with. And most doctors that I talked to that were not involved didn't realize in the extent or the depth of what was being done. They just didn't do that. And they would say, well, you got to use the water to help to improve the dental health of children and that sort of stuff. And everybody does everything for their children. This may not be one of the things. Probably the best thing to do would be involved in locally. But if you want to focus more attention and you want to get more results, you probably should do it statewide, you know. I think you'd be okay doing that, doing it regional wide. But the best thing to do is to join with other groups that have already got started. Just join together, and there's a lot of strength in numbers. I would still believe that, too. In democracy, that's the case anyway. Join with those groups and really do your research and get it down pat and have the answers there before you even ask them. And you'll know. And that's the best thing to do. So I guess you can start locally, but move to expand statewide. And nationally would come after the states were involved.